Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're not just looking at a geological structure that happens to sit on our planet. We're looking at something that absolutely presides over it. We're talking about K2, known reverently to those in the climbing community as the Mountain of Mountains. But as you'll see, K2 isn't just a peak. For anyone who actually dares to approach it, it acts more like a primal, unforgiving antagonist. It's a mountain that doesn't just challenge you, it literally judges you.
Okay, let's dive into this, because to truly grasp what K2 is, you have to understand its fearsome reputation. After a grueling expedition back in 1953, American climber George Bell stood in the shadow of this behemoth and uttered a phrase that perfectly captured its sheer dread. He said, "It's a savage mountain that tries to kill you." And you know, that single, chilling sentence birthed its infamous nickname, the Savage Mountain, setting the tone for literally every expedition that followed.
K2 stands at a staggering 8,611 meters, that's over 28,000 feet, right on the border of Pakistan-administered Gilgit-Baltistan and China-administered Xinjiang. Now, you might be thinking, well, Everest is taller, right? And yeah, you'd be right, but only by a mere 239 meters. The thing is, K2's altitude is just the very beginning of the threat. Height is just a number here. It's the mountain's shape and its brutal location that actually turn it into a lethal trap.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is K2's deep, almost terrifying impersonality. Back in 1856, when British surveyor Thomas Montgomery first mapped the Karakoram Range, he realized this massive peak didn't even have a local name. Why? Because it is so incredibly remote, you can't even see it from Ascol, which is the nearest village. Italian climber Fosco Marini hauntingly described it as atoms and stars. It's a mountain totally detached from humanity, just hidden away behind the massive Baltoro Glacier. To put K2's absolute ferocity into perspective, we really have to compare it to its famous taller brother. Everest boasts over 7,000 successful summits, thanks in large part to heavy commercial guiding operations. Its death rate is around 1%. K2? Well, it's the exclusive preserve of elite mountaineers. It has seen fewer than 800 successful summits in its entire history, and the death rate? A staggering 25%.
And this brilliantly illustrates a terrifying reality. Historically, that 25% translates to one person dying for every 4 climbers who actually reach the summit. Just take a second to imagine accepting those odds, a 1 in 4 chance of simply not coming home. It's a heavy, terrifying reality that just hangs over every single climber the moment they arrive at base camp.
So why exactly is K2 so much deadlier? Basically, it's a perfect storm of mechanical and environmental nightmares. Unlike Everest's relatively gentle slopes, K2 is this steep, perfect pyramid. The north side alone drops over 3,200 meters in just 3,000 meters of horizontal distance. Add to that the severe technical rock and ice climbing required, wildly unpredictable northern storms, a brutal death zone above 7,500 meters where oxygen is a third of what it is at sea level, and a total lack of those commercial support networks you'd find on Everest. It demands absolute, unwavering perfection.
This terrifying reputation? It was forged in blood and heartbreak during the early attempts. In 1902, Oscar Eckenstein and Aleister Crowley tried and failed, getting exactly 8 clear weather days out of 68. In 1909, the Duke of Abruzzi just gave up and outright declared the mountain unclimbable. Fast forward to the late 1930s, American teams started making headway on what's now called the Abruzzi Spur. Fritz Weisner's 1939 team missed the summit by a heartbreaking 200 meters and lost 4 men. And in 1953, Charles Houston's American team endured a desperate, heroic retreat, resulting in the tragic death of Art Gilkey. His memorial actually still stands at base camp today.
But finally, the mountain yielded. On July 31, 1954, an Italian expedition led by Ardisio Desio succeeded. Climbers Achille Compagnoni and Lino Lisidelli stood on top of the world's second highest peak. It was a monumental triumph for sure, but it was almost immediately shadowed by a dark, bitter controversy that would literally take decades to resolve.
That controversy centered around a young, incredibly fit climber named Walter Bonatti. So Bonatti had carried vital oxygen all the way up to 8,100 meters for the summit team, but Compagnoni and Lisidelli deliberately moved their high camp, ensuring Bonatti couldn't join the final summit bid. Stranded in the open, Bonatti was forced into a bivouac, which is basically an exposed, temporary camp without a tent, in negative 50 degrees Celsius temperatures. He somehow survived, but his teammates falsely accused of him using their oxygen during the night. It took decades for the truth to come out and for Bonatti to finally be vindicated as the expedition's true, selfless hero.
Now, we have to turn to the darkest chapter in K2's modern history,
After 2 months of horrific weather in the summer of 2008, a brief, tantalizing weather window finally opened on August 1st. Desperate to seize the opportunity, 25 climbers from 9 different expeditions rushed the summit all at once.
What unfolded was a terrifying, step-by-step chain of catastrophic events. First, teams ran out of rope too early, causing severe delays in a notoriously steep section known as the bottleneck. They reached the summit hours behind schedule, running dangerously low on supplemental oxygen as darkness fell. Then, the unthinkable happened. During the descent, a massive avalanche struck. It killed a climber and severed the fixed ropes in the bottleneck, the very lifeline these climbers needed to get down safely. Stranded above 8,000 meters, multiple climbers were trapped overnight in the death zone. By the time it was over, 11 people had perished.
Among the 11 lost that day was Ger MacDonald, the first Irishman to ever summit K2. You know, in the unforgiving reality of the death zone, there's an unwritten rule: self-preservation above all else. But MacDonald broke that rule. He actually stopped to help heavily injured Korean climbers who were tangled in the ropes. In his attempt to save others, MacDonald vanished on the mountain, his body never to be found. It's a profoundly human tragedy playing out amidst the sheer indifference of the mountain.
Let's move to and see how this builds into the modern era, because despite the overwhelming tragedy, K2 remains a theater for modern miracles. For decades, the climbing world believed K2 in winter was entirely impossible. The avalanches, the hurricane-force winds, the unfathomable cold. But in January 2021, a team of Nepalese climbers, led by Nirmal Purja and Mingma Galji Sharpa, shattered that belief. They conquered K2's winter fury, making it the final 8,000er on Earth to be summited in the winter season.
Yet, even with all these historic milestones, including an absolutely incredible full ski descent by André Bargiel in 2018, K2 still holds tight to its secrets. The massive, imposing east face remains completely unclimbed. It is just this terrifying wall of highly unstable ice and snow formations. Even the greatest climbers in the world look at the east face and realize, some lines on this mountain are still a bridge too far.
So, the crucial point is, with the avalanches, the betrayals, the horrific 1 in 4 death statistic, and the sheer terror of missing fixed ropes in the death zone, you really have to ask, why do it? Why leave the safety of your family and your home to subject yourself to the savage mountain? It's a question that strikes at the very core of human psychology.
Reinhold Messner, who is widely considered the greatest mountaineer of all time, provided the answer when he called K2 the mountain of mountains. For the absolute elite, K2 is the ultimate yardstick of human ability. It's the peak against which all other peaks are measured. K2 isn't a tourist attraction, and it's certainly not a stadium. It is a cathedral for those seeking to touch the absolute limits of the extraordinary.
Which leaves us with a final thought to ponder. K2 is a primal force, a combination of atoms, stars, and abysses that forces humanity to confront its own limits. When you consider the sheer ambition and the primal pull that draws people to the freezing slopes of the Karakoram, I have to ask you, what is your ultimate challenge? What endeavor, what goal would push you to risk absolutely everything you have? Thanks for joining me for this explainer on K2, the Mountain of Mountains. Keep exploring, and I'll see you next time.